everyone and welcome to Economicspedia. Today we are here to have a discussion on the views of Nobel Laureate Dr. Abhijit Vinayak Banerjee, what he has to say on the Indian economy in order to revive from this pandemic. So in this session I'm going to summarize the whole discussion with Dr. Abhijit Vinayak Banerjee into 5 simple points so that you can easily relate and you can easily understand what is the basic objective of his talk. So let's start without any further ado. Starting with the first point that Professor Abhijit Vinayak Banerjee have pointed out is that in this current scenario, it is very much important to focus on the demand. That is, we need to revive the demand. In India, it has always been observed that the demand has always been on the lower side, even before the pandemic. And now, under this harsh situation of crisis, this whole scenario is just getting worse. So that is why in the first point, I would like to point out the main thing that Professor Banerjee has pointed out is that we need to increase the spending power of the people. So point number 1 is to increase the spending power of the people instead of targeting the specific MSMEs. This is because when the people have money in their hands, then they can buy, and actually this raw money in their hand, actually what is happening is the money in their hands of the people provides an incentive to purchase the consumer goods that they actually want to. So that is why increasing the spending power of the people is the important perspective. Now moving on to the second point. So the second point that Professor Banerjee has pointed out, who is a professor of MIT at US, is that we need to provide the bottom 60% of the population with the funds. That means transferring funds to the bottom 60% of the population. Yes, the bottom 60%. Because he pointed out that targeting the poor is an expensive exercise under this current situation. This is because targeting poor is absolutely expensive exercise of all time as compared to current scenario. Why? Right? This is the question that you must be thinking, that why it is an expensive one. This is because under this lockdown, there are many people whose shops have been closed for over 6 weeks. So whom to target? We don't know, do we? So that is why that makes the whole targeting the poor a very expensive one, a very expensive exercise. This is the main reason that we need to provide funds to the bottom 60% of the population. Now moving to point 3 that Professor Banerjee has pointed out. In the third point, I would like to place this point that has been mentioned by Professor Banerjee, is that in order to protect the farms, protect farms from getting bankrupted, it is important on the government side to cancel all the debt payments. Government should cancel all the debt payments for the entire quarter and not just reschedule it, because this rescheduling it is again kind of a burden on the future generation, on the people of the later period. So that is again creating a burden. So in order to be free from all kind of burden, it is very much important to cancel all the debt payments and not to reschedule it for the upcoming quarters. So this is the third point that has been mentioned by Professor Banerjee. Now let's move to the fourth point. In the fourth point, I would like to highlight the segment where Professor Banerjee has talked about the migrant workers. And he mentioned that all the welfare schemes are not very much effective or are not adequate for the migrant workers. Not adequate for migrant workers. For this, he said, Professor Banerjee has advocated that providing temporary ration cards, providing temporary ration cards will ensure that the poor people or all the people get at least access to the food grains they require in order to have a healthy life. So this providing temporary ration card is the first aspect that needs to be taken care of. And also has been mentioned by Professor Banerjee that all the welfare schemes and policies which has put up by the United Progressive Alliance or UPA of government is not very much adequate in with respect to the current scenario. So here we talks about the welfare schemes and policies that has been given or provided by UPA of government is again not adequate. Okay, and also has been mentioned by Professor Banerjee is that all the migrant workers is not very much able to reap the benefits from Manrega and the access of food grains as mentioned in the National Food Security Act. So with this we can say that yes, the welfare schemes may be not adequate in the current scenario. With this we are good to move to the fifth point. In the fifth point, I would like to place this point that has been mentioned by Professor Banerjee is that the welfare package or the targeting package needs to be increased. So stimulus package needs to be increased. This actually means to say that in India, the targeting package or the packages that has been provided by the government should be increased. And he also mentioned that the package that will be further announced by the government should be at least more than 1% of GDP. It has to be more than 1% of GDP. Right now, the government has given a package of 1.29% of GDP. Whereas he gave a contrasting comparison with the United States of America, where more than 10% of GDP has been invested in the relief packages of this pandemic. So it is very much important for the government to increase the package in order to help the Indian economy to come out of this biggest crisis of all time. So these are the highlights that has been pointed out in a very summarized form so that it is easier for all of you to understand and to have a view or from your perspective that how the Indian economy should move on. And if you have any kind of further queries related to Economicspedia or any other inquiry or doubt, please don't hesitate to let us know below in the comment section, and you can also mail us at our official mail ID. Thank you for watching this.